Do you know how a poor boy from a tiny fishing town became India's Rocketman? Stay with me and see how dreams can really touch the sky. This is Easy English Official, and today we will travel together through the inspiring journey of a young boy who never gave up. You will learn English while exploring his life, struggles, and amazing achievements. It is simple, fun, and full of hope for everyone. From selling newspapers to studying under a dim lamp, he dreamed big when no one else could imagine it. Every step of his journey teaches us lessons about courage, perseverance, and the power of knowledge. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get inspired by the incredible story of a boy who reached for the stars. Chapter 1. The Boy in the Dust. He was born in a small town called Rameshwaram, where the streets were filled with sand and the sea was never far away. His family was poor, yet the home was warm with love and care. The boy's father was a simple boat owner, and his mother cooked for neighbors to support the family. There was no luxury, but there was peace in that humble house. From the beginning, the boy knew that life would not be easy. His shoes were old, his books were borrowed, and sometimes there was not enough food for everyone. Still, he never complained, because he believed that learning could change everything. Knowledge was his only treasure, and he guarded it like gold. His eyes shone whenever he opened a book. He did not dream of toys or rich clothes, but of ideas that could lift him beyond the dusty streets. When other children ran to play, he sat under the dim light, reading page after page. The words in those books gave him wings, even before he could build real ones. Education was not just a duty, it was his doorway to freedom. But dreams alone could not pay for school. To support his studies, the boy began selling newspapers in the mornings. Every day before sunrise, he carried the heavy bundle through the sandy lanes. His small hands passed the papers to houses, while his mind held on to the lessons he would learn later that day. Sweat and dust clung to his skin, but he carried hope in his heart. Each coin he earned felt like a step toward his future. He did not spend it on sweets or games. Instead, every rupee went to his school fees and books. His classmates saw only a quiet boy with old clothes, but inside, he was already building the foundation of greatness. Every sale was a brick in the wall of his dream. The mornings were tiring, yet he walked proudly. He knew he was not just selling newspapers, he was buying his future. Sometimes he stumbled under the weight, but he stood up again, whispering to himself that this sacrifice was worth it. The streets may have been dusty, but in his heart he was already touching the sky. His family admired his strength, though they worried about his health. His mother's eyes often followed him as he left with the papers. She wished for an easier life for her son, but she also knew that hardship was shaping his spirit. Every struggle was carving him into someone extraordinary. The neighbors sometimes teased him, saying he worked too hard for nothing. But he did not let their words break him. Instead, he smiled and said nothing, letting his actions speak. Deep inside, he believed that one day they would see why he had chosen this path. He was too busy dreaming to listen to doubt. In school, teachers noticed his bright curiosity. He asked questions others were afraid to ask, and he listened with both ears and all his heart. Even when he had no answers, he never stopped trying. His hunger for learning impressed his mentors, who quietly hoped he would go far beyond their small town. Books became his closest friends. While other children laughed on the playground, he found joy in turning pages. Stories of great scientists, explorers, and inventors filled his mind. He imagined himself one day among them, creating something new for the world. The dust around him did not limit his imagination, it fueled it. Every evening, when the day's work and school were done, he sat with his family. Their meals were simple, sometimes only rice and vegetables, but in those moments he felt rich, surrounded by love. Poverty did not defeat them, because they had each other and a belief in tomorrow. Love gave him strength to carry on. As the days turned into years, the boy's routine became his training ground. Work taught him discipline, poverty taught him gratitude, and books taught him vision. He was still just a boy in the dust, but inside he was already a dreamer of the skies. His story was only beginning, but even in those early days, greatness was quietly being born. Chapter 2. The Dawn of a Dream. One afternoon in school, the boy sat quietly in the classroom, waiting for his teacher to begin. The topic that day was science, but it was not just numbers or formulas. The teacher picked up a piece of chalk and drew a bird on the board, its wings stretched wide. The class leaned forward with curiosity. The teacher explained how a bird flies, not by magic, but by the law of lift and the power of air. He spoke of wings, pressure, and balance, making the invisible forces of nature sound simple and beautiful. For most students, it was just a lesson in physics. For one boy, it became the opening of a new world. As the chalk lines turned into diagrams of airplanes, the boy's heart began to race. He imagined the sky not as something distant, but as a place where he might one day belong. The dream of flight entered his mind like a spark, and it lit up everything inside him. He no longer saw the classroom walls. He saw the endless blue above. That night, he could not sleep. The sound of the waves outside his home reminded him of engines roaring in the sky. He lay awake, thinking about wings, machines, and the future. The dream was fresh and fragile, but it was also powerful. It gave him a reason to wake up with excitement the next morning. From then on, every science lesson became a treasure to him. He studied harder, asking more questions than before. His teacher noticed his shining eyes and encouraged him gently, saying that knowledge could take him anywhere. Those words became seeds planted deep in his heart, growing stronger each day. The boy began collecting anything he could find about airplanes and rockets. Old magazines, borrowed books, and scraps of information became his secret wealth. He would stare at the pictures of aircraft for hours, tracing their shapes with his fingers. Each picture whispered to him that the impossible could be possible. Even while selling newspapers, his mind drifted back to the classroom. He imagined folding the papers into wings and letting them soar above the rooftops. Though his feet touched the dusty ground, his imagination already lived in the skies. Hope became his fuel, and curiosity became his compass. His friends sometimes laughed at him, saying his head was always in the clouds. But he did not mind their jokes. For him, the clouds were not foolish dreams, but the path to his destiny. He believed that if birds could fly, then human beings could go even higher. Laughter could not shake his faith. At home, he shared his dreams with his family. His father listened silently, smiling with patience, while his mother offered quiet prayers for his success. His sister promised to support him in any way she could. Though they had little money, they gave him something richer: belief and love. Slowly, the boy began to see himself not just as a student, but as a future creator. He imagined building machines that could rise into the air. He imagined touching the stars with hands that once sold newspapers. Every small step in learning became a piece of that larger dream. Sometimes, fear whispered that his dream was too big for someone so small. But each time doubt appeared, he remembered his teacher's chalk drawing on the board. The picture of that bird reminded him that flight was not fantasy, it was science. And if science was real, then his dream could also be real. Thus, the dawn of his dream was not loud or dramatic. It was a quiet spark, born in a small classroom, carried in the heart of a boy from a fishing town. Yet that spark would grow into a fire strong enough to light the path of a nation. The boy who once walked in the dust was now looking at the sky with purpose. Chapter 3. The Crossroads of Choice. As the boy grew older, his dream became clearer, but so did the challenges before him. School had opened doors of knowledge, yet beyond those doors stood difficult decisions. Life was no longer only about learning, it was about choosing a path, and the choice would decide his future. In his small town, many believed the best future was to serve in the military. A military career promised respect, stability, and a clear direction. For a boy from a poor family, it seemed like the safest choice. Yet deep inside, his heart beat for something different, something higher. He felt a strong pull toward science, toward the mysteries of flight and the possibilities of machines. While the military offered honor, science offered discovery. Both paths demanded courage, but only one matched the dream that had been growing in him since childhood. He stood at the crossroads, torn between duty and passion. The voices around him often pushed him toward the military. Relatives said it would secure his future. Friends told him it was the easiest way to prove his strength. Even the thought of wearing a uniform gave him pride. But whenever he imagined himself in that life, he felt a silence inside his heart. At night, he wrestled with the question, unable to sleep. Should he follow the safer road or risk everything to chase the sky? He thought of his family's struggles and the sacrifices they had made. Could he really take the harder path, the one that might fail, when they had already given so much? Yet his dream refused to die. Every time he looked at the stars, the decision seemed clearer. He remembered the chalk bird his teacher had drawn, the stories of airplanes and rockets, the excitement that burned in him during science lessons. Those memories reminded him that his life's purpose was not safety, but creation. Courage does not mean the absence of fear, he told himself. It means choosing the right road even when fear is heavy. He realized that the greatest risk was not failure, but never trying. If he chose the easy path, he would betray the boy who once sold newspapers to buy knowledge. Slowly, his mind settled on the truth. The military might give him a job, but science would give him a mission. He did not just want to live, he wanted to build, to give something back to the world. He chose the path of science, not because it was easy, but because it was his calling. When he finally spoke of his choice, his family listened quietly. His father nodded, proud of his courage. His mother whispered blessings, though worry shadowed her face. His sister promised that she would always support him. Love gave him strength to walk onto the harder road. With that decision, the boy stepped out of childhood and into responsibility. He knew the path ahead would be filled with struggle. There would be failures, disappointments, and sacrifices. but there would also be discovery, hope, and the chance to turn dreams into reality. At the crossroads of choice, he learned a lesson that would guide him for life. It is better to follow a dream with risk than to live safely with regret. The dust of his childhood was still on his feet, but his eyes were already lifted to the sky. His journey as a scientist had begun. The boy had chosen not just a career, but a destiny. That decision would shape not only his life, but also the future of his nation. What began as a small dream in a dusty town was now a clear direction. The crossroads had tested him, and he had answered with courage. Chapter 4. The College Struggle. When he entered the Madras Institute of Technology, the boy thought he had already crossed the hardest mountain. But college life showed him that the real struggle had only just begun. The fees were high, the pressure was heavy, and his family's pockets were almost empty. Every day felt like a battle between his dream and his poverty. His sister became his greatest supporter. She sold her jewelry, her most precious possessions, to pay for his education. Each coin she gave him carried the weight of sacrifice, love, and hope. He held those coins with trembling hands, knowing that he had no right to waste them. Every book he opened was a debt he promised to repay with success. The classrooms were larger, the lessons faster, and the competition sharper. Many of his classmates came from wealthy families, carrying confidence like armor. He came with second-hand clothes and the memory of selling newspapers. Sometimes he felt small, but he also felt determined. He reminded himself that talent was not measured by money. Late nights became his normal routine. He studied until his eyes burned and his body begged for rest. While others laughed in the canteen, he sat alone, chasing every detail in his notes. Each page of learning felt like another brick in the tower of his dream. Exhaustion followed him, but so did determination. Then came the day his professor gave him an ultimatum. The project he had worked on was far from complete, and the deadline was near. The professor looked him in the eye and said, "Finish your paper in 1 week, or I will revoke your scholarship." The words hit him like a storm. His dream now hung on a single thread. Fear filled his heart, but he refused to let it break him. He locked himself in the lab, working day and night, forgetting the world outside. His hands shook, his eyes blurred, but he kept building, calculating, and correcting. Each mistake felt like a knife, but each small success gave him hope to continue. He thought of his sister's sacrifice whenever weakness whispered in his ear. Her jewelry had turned into his books, her tears into his courage. If he failed, her sacrifice would be in vain. This thought gave him fire, pushing him forward when his body wanted to collapse. Love became his energy. On the final night, when the deadline was close, he worked until the sun rose. Sweat covered his face, ink stained his fingers, and fatigue pulled at his soul. But the model stood complete, shining under the dim light of the lab. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to smile. The next morning, he presented his work to the professor. His voice trembled, but his heart stood strong. The professor studied the project silently, then nodded with approval. The scholarship was saved, and so was his dream. That moment felt like the first real victory of his life. He walked out of the classroom with tears in his eyes. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. He had survived the test of fire, and he had come out stronger. The boy who once sold newspapers was now a man who could fight for his future. College did not give him comfort, but it gave him discipline, courage, and resilience. It taught him that success is born only when we are pushed to the edge. It showed him that sacrifice and hard work can carry us through the darkest nights. Poverty was still his companion, but it no longer controlled his spirit. Thus, the college struggle became more than an academic challenge. It became the training ground for his destiny. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the pressure carved him into a leader who would one day carry the weight of a nation's dreams. His story was only beginning, and his wings were slowly taking shape. Chapter 5. The Pain of Failure. After graduating from college, he carried both knowledge and hope in his heart. His dream of flying still burned inside him, and the Indian Air Force seemed like the perfect place to fulfill it. He imagined himself in uniform, standing tall, serving his country in the skies. Every step toward the exam felt like a step closer to destiny. He prepared with determination, revising every subject and practicing with discipline. Nights were spent in study, mornings in prayer, and afternoons in quiet focus. He believed that his hard work would open the door to his dream. The boy from Rameshwaram was ready to prove that poverty could not stop talent. But destiny is not always kind, and not every effort ends in success. When the results were announced, his name was 9th on the list. Only 8 spots were available. Just one step away from his dream, the door closed before his eyes. He stood in silence, unable to believe what he saw. The weight of disappointment fell heavily on his shoulders. He had carried his family's hopes, his sister's sacrifices, and his own burning desire into that exam. Now it felt as if all those years of struggle had been wasted. The tears he had held back for so long finally came, washing his face with grief. Failure has a sharp voice, and it spoke loudly in his mind. It whispered that he was not good enough, that the dream of flying was not meant for him. For days, he carried a storm inside, walking with his head low, afraid to meet the eyes of his family. The pain was deep, because it struck at the very core of his dream. Yet in the quiet moments of sorrow, he began to see another truth. He realized that failure does not mean the end, it only means a different road. The rejection from the Air Force was not a punishment, but a redirection. His destiny, though unclear, was still alive. The fire inside him refused to die. He remembered his teacher's lessons and his own promise to himself. Never stop learning, never stop dreaming. Slowly, he lifted his head again. If the sky had rejected him, perhaps there was another way to reach it. A failure in one path could become an opportunity in another. His family stood beside him, reminding him that worth is not measured by one exam. His mother's gentle words, his father's quiet strength, and his sister's unwavering belief gave him courage once more. They reminded him that failure could break a dream, but it could not break a dreamer. With time, the pain became fuel. He turned disappointment into determination, telling himself that even if the Air Force had closed its doors, the world of science was still wide open. Rockets, machines, and knowledge called out to him, offering a different way to touch the sky. This realization planted a new seed in his mind. Perhaps he was not meant to fly as a pilot, but to create the very machines that would carry others into the heavens. Instead of sitting in the cockpit, he would stand behind the design. The dream had changed its shape, but not its spirit. He learned one of life's hardest lessons, that failure can be a teacher greater than success. Pain can cut deeply, but it can also carve a stronger soul. What felt like the end was, in truth, the beginning of a greater journey. He had lost one battle, but the war for his destiny was still to come. Thus, the pain of failure became the turning point of his story. From the tears of rejection rose the courage of a creator. The boy who could not become a pilot would become something even greater, a scientist who would one day build wings not only for himself, but for his entire nation. Chapter 6. First Step to Space. After the bitter taste of failure, he searched for a new beginning. The Air Force had closed its doors, but the doors of science stood open. Soon he was offered a position at the newly formed Indian Space Research Organization. For a boy who once dreamed of touching the sky, this was a path of hope and discovery. The laboratories were simple and far from the advanced facilities of rich nations. There were no shiny machines, no endless resources. What they had instead were determined minds and hungry hearts. The young scientist looked around and realized that greatness would have to be built from almost nothing. At first, the challenge seemed overwhelming. How could a country still struggling with poverty compete with nations who had already touched the moon? Doubt crept in, but it did not stay long. He remembered his own story, born with little, but carried by dreams. Now he saw his nation in the same way. His team was small, yet every member carried the fire of belief. They worked long hours, sharing ideas, arguing and laughing in between. Sometimes they lacked tools, so they invented their own. Sometimes they lacked money, so they used creativity. Their strength was not in wealth, but in willpower. He often thought of his childhood as he walked through the sandy test sites. The dust that once covered his feet now covered the rockets they built. From scraps of metal and pieces of borrowed equipment, they began shaping the future. Their laboratory was not just a workplace, it was a battlefield of hope. Failures came quickly, but so did lessons. A broken wire, a failed test, or an exploded part became their teachers. Instead of crying, they studied every mistake, writing notes and correcting errors. Each failure was painful, yet each one carried them closer to success. They learned to see setbacks as stepping stones. Even in the hardest times, laughter and friendship kept the team alive. They shared tea, stories, and dreams late into the night. When one grew tired, another lifted him up. They were not just colleagues, they were a family of dreamers. The spirit of unity became their most powerful tool. The young scientist's role grew with each project. He was no longer just a student of knowledge. He was a creator of ideas. His hands touched wires, engines, and designs that could one day rise into the sky. Every day he felt a deeper sense of purpose, as if the universe itself was calling him forward. What they built did not look like the rockets of America or Russia. It was smaller, rougher, and sometimes held together by improvisation. Yet it carried the same dream: to fly, to rise, to prove that India could stand tall in the world of science. Their rockets were born not from wealth, but from courage. Villagers often watched with curiosity as strange machines were transported across narrow roads. Some laughed, calling them toys of fools. But the team ignored the voices of doubt. They knew that history is never written by those who laugh from the sidelines, but by those who dare to try. For the young scientist, this was more than a job. It was his second chance at flight, a chance that destiny had given after rejecting him as a pilot. He would not sit in a cockpit, but he would build the wings of a nation. His failure had transformed into a far greater mission. Thus, his first step into space was not marked by glory, but by grit. It was not a smooth road, but a rocky one, carved by sweat, sacrifice, and endless nights of work. Still, each small success whispered of a brighter future. The boy from Rameshwaram had finally found his place among the stars, not as a passenger, but as a builder of dreams. Chapter 7. The Birth of a Rocket. The dream of reaching space started to take shape in the dusty labs. Every blueprint, every diagram, and every tiny component mattered. They were building not just a rocket, but a symbol of hope for a young nation. Each hand that touched the metal carried the weight of dreams. Long nights became normal as the team worked tirelessly. The engines were tested over and over, each failure teaching a new lesson. They had no luxury of advanced machines, so their creativity became their greatest asset. Improvisation turned into innovation. Sometimes the work felt impossible. Parts didn't fit, calculations went wrong, and materials broke under pressure. Yet the young scientist never lost faith. He encouraged his team, reminding them that every great achievement starts with struggle. Perseverance was their fuel. They learned to trust each other completely. A misstep by one member was corrected by another, and no one ever blamed anyone. Every success and failure was shared equally. Teamwork became the invisible rocket that propelled them forward. The construction of the rocket was painstaking. Engines were assembled piece by piece, circuits wired with care, and metal welded under tight supervision. Each small victory, like a perfectly joined joint, brought smiles that rivaled the excitement of the launch itself. Sometimes they slept in the labs, surrounded by tools and plans. They joked and shared stories to keep spirits high. Even exhaustion couldn't dim their excitement, because they knew that every drop of sweat was building the future of their country. The young scientist spent hours studying designs from around the world. He borrowed ideas, modified them, and turned them into something uniquely Indian. He believed that limitations were not barriers, but invitations to innovate. There were moments of fear when tests failed or calculations didn't match, but fear never turned into defeat. Instead, it motivated the team to work harder, to check everything twice, and to dream bigger. Their courage grew with each obstacle they overcame. Finally, the day arrived when the rocket was ready for the first full assembly. The team gathered in awe, looking at the culmination of years of effort. They knew this was more than metal and fuel. It was their sweat, creativity, and belief materialized. The young scientist felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. This rocket carried the dreams of a nation and the hopes of a small boy who once watched the stars from a sandy street. The journey of 1,000 miles truly began here. Every night before the launch, he would walk around the rocket, imagining it soaring above clouds. Each screw, each panel, each wire seemed to hum with potential. He whispered to himself that failure was not the end, only a teacher along the way. And so, the first rocket of India was born. Not just a machine, but a testament to hard work, unity, and relentless hope. The boy from Rameshwaram had turned dreams into reality, and the sky was no longer the limit. It was just the beginning. Chapter 8. The First Failure. The team watched with bated breath as the rocket lifted off. The sky seemed to hold its breath too. Excitement filled every heart, dreams hovering in the clouds. But then the rocket wobbled, faltered, and fell into the sea. Tears welled up in the eyes of the scientists. Months of hard work felt like it had vanished in a splash. The young scientist stood silently, feeling the weight of disappointment. Yet, he knew that this moment would not define them. He took full responsibility for the failure, speaking words of encouragement to his team. "We will learn from this," he said. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of understanding." His courage lifted their spirits. Every failure taught them something new. They studied the wreckage, traced every wire, recalculated every angle, and documented every mistake. The ocean had swallowed the rocket, but it had delivered lessons instead. The young scientist reminded his team that mistakes were part of every journey. Success is not instant, and every setback was a stepping stone. They were building more than rockets. They were building resilience. Late nights were spent revising plans. They argued, they laughed, they brainstormed. Each new idea became a piece of the puzzle. The team learned that unity was as important as technical skill. The disappointment was heavy, yet it fueled determination. They knew the next attempt could succeed if they embraced every lesson learned. Each failure had strengthened their bond and sharpened their minds. They realized that fear of failure should never stop them. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Their hearts remained full of hope and ambition. The young scientist stayed by the water's edge, imagining the rocket's next flight. He dreamed not of the failure, but of the triumph to come. Every ripple in the sea reminded him that effort never disappears. Encouragement came in small moments: a smile, a pat on the back, a shared story of perseverance. They reminded each other that the journey was just as important as the destination. The first failure became a symbol of learning. It taught humility, patience, and persistence. They knew that the dream of reaching the sky was still alive, burning brighter than ever. And so, with hearts stronger and minds sharper, the young scientist and his team prepared for the next launch. Failure was no longer a defeat. It was the spark for the fire that would carry them to success. Chapter 9. From Lesson to Triumph. The team gathered around the launch pad, hearts full of hope and minds full of lessons. Each failure had taught them something new, each mistake a map to improvement. They were ready to try again. They analyzed every detail, double-checked every calculation, and repaired every flaw. Collaboration became their greatest strength, and unity their secret weapon. Everyone knew their effort mattered. The young scientist encouraged his team to see mistakes as teachers. "We failed once," he said, "but now we know the path. Let's turn knowledge into action." His words ignited determination in every heart. Nights were spent testing and retesting, refining designs and adjusting equipment. Laughter mixed with frustration, but the team never lost sight of their goal. The dream of touching the sky grew stronger. They remembered the first crash and vowed not to repeat it. Every lesson was now a stepping stone, every error a guide. They were building not just a rocket, but a future filled with hope. Small victories kept them motivated, successfully launching small test rockets, correcting tiny errors, seeing progress with their own eyes. Every small win felt like a giant leap. Doubt tried to creep in, but teamwork and perseverance pushed it away. They reminded each other that resilience is built through struggle. No challenge could shake their resolve. The young scientist stayed by his team's side, offering guidance, encouragement, and inspiration. His belief in them was contagious, sparking courage in even the most anxious minds. On the day of the next launch, excitement and tension filled the air. Families, colleagues, and friends gathered, all hearts beating together, holding on to the hope of success. The countdown began, voices trembling with anticipation. Every second felt eternal, every heartbeat synchronized with the ticking clock. Their dream was about to take flight. As the rocket soared into the sky, cheers erupted. The years of failure, struggle, and hard work had finally paid off. Triumph was no longer distant. It was alive in every smile, every tear of joy. The young scientist looked at his team, pride shining in his eyes. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have learned, we have grown, and we have triumphed together." The sky is now our first milestone. Chapter 10. The Rocket's Triumph. The rocket rose gracefully into the sky, leaving behind a trail of smoke and dreams. Every eye followed its path, hearts beating with hope. The years of struggle were finally taking flight. The team erupted in cheers as the rocket soared higher and higher. Their hard work, sleepless nights, and determination had turned into a visible triumph. Joy filled the air around them. The young scientist smiled, tears in his eyes. He remembered the first failure and how far they had come. Each setback had built the strength and knowledge that now lifted them all. Spectators gasped in awe as the rocket reached its highest point, steady and proud. It was a symbol of courage, persistence, and the power of teamwork. Dreams were no longer distant. They were real. The young scientist hugged his team, feeling the collective pride and relief. Every hand, every effort, every small correction had contributed to this historic moment. Success was shared, not owned. Messages of congratulations poured in from across the country. Their achievement had inspired millions, showing that even the most impossible dreams could be realized with dedication. Children looked up at the sky in wonder, imagining themselves among the stars. The young scientist knew that today's triumph would plant seeds of hope in countless hearts. The rocket's success was more than science. It was a story of resilience. It taught the world that failure is not the end, but a step toward greatness. Lessons learned had blossomed into victory. In the quiet moments after the celebration, the team reflected on their journey. They had grown together, learned together, and now triumphed together. Every struggle had been worth it. The young scientist stood proudly, thinking of the next challenge. The rocket had reached the sky, but their dreams were limitless. Success was a step, not the finish line. He reminded his team to stay humble, to keep learning, and to inspire others. Triumph was sweet, but responsibility and curiosity would guide them forward. As the sun set behind them, the rocket's trail still glowing in the sky, they felt hope and pride. The sky had been touched, and a new chapter of possibilities had begun. Chapter 11. The Title of the Missile Man. After the rocket successes, the young scientist was called to serve his nation in a new way. His knowledge and leadership were now needed for defense projects. Responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. He joined the missile development program, where challenges were greater and stakes higher. Each design required precision, innovation, and courage. Mistakes could cost years of work or lives. The team worked tirelessly, pushing boundaries with limited resources. They invented new methods, tested tirelessly, and learned from every small error. Creativity became their greatest ally. As missiles took shape and tests succeeded, the nation began to notice. The young scientist's work had a direct impact on security and pride. The title Missile Man started to emerge. Despite fame, he remained humble. He credited his team for every success and took full responsibility for every setback. Leadership was measured not in awards, but in trust and respect. He traveled across the country, inspiring young scientists and engineers. Sharing knowledge became as important as achieving milestones. His dream was bigger than personal glory. The young scientist faced immense pressure balancing innovation and safety. Every launch, every calculation was a lesson in patience and discipline. Mistakes taught more than success ever could. He believed that technology should empower the nation and its people. With every missile developed, he reminded himself and his team of the higher purpose: protection, pride, and progress. Recognition grew, but he never stopped learning. Books, discussions, and experiments fueled his passion. The title Missile Man was an honor, but the work and vision mattered more. The young scientist's calm, thoughtful demeanor inspired trust in everyone around him. Teams worked harder because they believed in his guidance and example. Motivation flowed naturally from his character. Every successful test reinforced the power of knowledge, teamwork, and perseverance. The journey from humble beginnings to national responsibility showed that dreams, combined with hard work, could change history. Even with accolades, he stayed grounded, always focused on the next goal. Learning, inspiring, and serving became his lifelong mission. The title, Missile Man, was a symbol, not the destination. Chapter 12. A Leader with a Heart. Despite his achievements in science, he always valued people above projects. He listened patiently, guided thoughtfully, and inspired those around him. Leadership was about serving, not commanding. He believed that a true leader shares credit and shoulders blame. Every success belonged to his team, every mistake to him alone. Humility became his signature, earning respect effortlessly. Colleagues admired his calm confidence. Even in tense situations, he remained composed, offering solutions and encouragement. His presence alone motivated the team to push harder. He celebrated small victories, knowing that each step forward built momentum. Recognition was secondary. The growth and morale of his team were paramount. Through challenges, he maintained empathy. He understood struggles and celebrated efforts. Leadership was a human connection, not just strategic planning. He mentored young scientists, nurturing curiosity and confidence. His guidance was gentle but firm, helping others discover their own potential while staying true to their dreams. His decisions were thoughtful, balancing ambition with responsibility. Every choice was measured, considering impact on both projects and people. Wisdom guided his actions. Even in public life, he remained approachable and humble. He valued conversations with juniors, learning from their perspectives. Respect and kindness defined his leadership style. He taught that success is shared, not owned. Every innovation, breakthrough, or achievement was a result of collective effort. Teams thrived under his thoughtful guidance. He led by example, showing that integrity and hard work matter more than titles or fame. His life was a lesson in balancing knowledge, empathy, and humility. Through his heart-centered leadership, he left a lasting impact on colleagues, students, and the nation. His example inspired generations to lead with compassion and courage. Even as responsibilities grew, he remained true to his principles. Leadership for him was about lifting others and leaving a legacy of trust, hope, and inspiration. Chapter 13. From Scientist to President. From a humble scientist, he rose to the highest office of India. His journey was unexpected, yet he carried his principles and humility into the presidency. Leadership now reached a national stage. He remained a man of simple habits, preferring thoughtful dialogue over pomp and ceremony. Every action reflected his lifelong values of honesty, dedication, and service. Though the role came with immense responsibility, he never lost touch with the people. He listened sincerely, understanding their hopes, fears, and aspirations. He inspired the nation by example, showing that dedication and knowledge could lead to extraordinary achievements. Leadership was about guidance, not power. Even as president, he connected with students and young professionals, sharing lessons from his own life. Education and inspiration were his true mission. He encouraged innovation and scientific thinking, reminding citizens that progress comes from curiosity and hard work. Every policy and speech emphasized empowerment. The nation admired his calm wisdom. People trusted his integrity, knowing decisions were made for the collective good, not personal gain. Respect flowed naturally. He bridged the worlds of science and governance, bringing analytical thinking into leadership. Problem-solving and vision guided his presidency. Despite fame and recognition, he lived modestly, avoiding luxury and extravagance. Simplicity defined him, creating a relatable and approachable image for all citizens. His speeches were heartfelt, focusing on hope, growth, and national unity. Words inspired action, and actions reflected words. Integrity became his hallmark. He transformed the presidency into a platform for learning, motivation, and national pride. Citizens saw a leader who embodied knowledge, ethics, and humanity. Even after his tenure, his influence endured. Lessons, values, and vision continued to inspire young minds and leaders across India, leaving a legacy beyond politics. Chapter 14. The Teacher of Hope. After leaving the presidency, he devoted his life to inspiring young minds. Education and motivation became his new mission. Every lecture aimed to ignite curiosity. He traveled widely, meeting students and teachers, sharing stories of perseverance and dreams. His presence encouraged learning beyond textbooks. Books like Wings of Fire and Ignited Minds carried his wisdom to millions. Through writing, he connected deeply with young readers everywhere. He believed every student had potential waiting to be unlocked. Encouragement and guidance were his tools to spark hope and ambition. Even in crowded halls, he listened intently, responding with thoughtful advice. Every question mattered, and every mind deserved attention. He emphasized that failure is not the end, but a step toward success. Lessons from setbacks were as important as achievements. His talks were filled with optimism, painting a future where dedication and knowledge could transform lives. Dreams were attainable with effort. He nurtured a vision of India where youth contributed positively to society. Responsibility, ethics, and compassion were as vital as intelligence. He inspired teachers too, showing that education is a partnership between mentor and learner. Teaching was a path to creating change. Through his life, he demonstrated humility and purpose. Recognition was secondary. Shaping minds and hearts was his true reward. Even in old age, he remained energetic and passionate. Every encounter left students motivated, confident, and inspired to act. His legacy as a teacher of hope lives on. Generations continue to draw inspiration from his words, carrying forward his message of dreams, knowledge, and perseverance. Chapter 15. The Unfinished Journey. His life ended while speaking to young students, sharing lessons he cherished for decades. Even in his final moments, he inspired others. The classroom was filled with hope, laughter, and curiosity. His dedication to teaching never wavered, showing his true passion until the very end. Though his body was gone, his spirit remained alive in every student he touched. Dreams, courage, and values continued to spread. He reminded everyone that learning never stops. Knowledge, kindness, and perseverance are timeless gifts to share with the world. The nation mourned, but his legacy provided comfort and guidance. Citizens saw a life devoted to service, education, and inspiration. Stories of his humble beginnings inspired countless people to believe in themselves. Hard work and dreams can overcome any obstacle. His life proved that greatness is measured by impact, not fame. A simple man with a vision can change millions of lives. He encouraged young minds to dream big and work hard. Optimism and determination became his lifelong message. Even after passing, his books, speeches, and lessons continued to guide future generations. His words became a beacon of hope. He left behind a roadmap for life filled with purpose, learning, and compassion. Every action reflected integrity and dedication. His journey was unfinished in the sense that his vision lives on. Students carry his dreams forward, spreading knowledge and inspiration. The story of a rocket man continues, not just in history books, but in the hearts of everyone who dares to dream and strive for greatness. His journey shows us that dreams are not limited by money or circumstances. Every failure, every obstacle, and every small success shaped him into the great leader and scientist he became. Remember, your dedication and curiosity can take you places you never thought possible. Thank you for watching Easy English Official. Keep learning, keep dreaming, and never stop reaching for your own stars. Share this story with your friends, and let's inspire more young hearts to believe in themselves and in the power of knowledge.